Welcome to the Ask Me How I Know podcast, the only podcast in the multifamily niche replicating what takes place outside the walls of a seminar. This is like the lobby, where honest, unscripted conversations take place and transformation happens. We'll talk about practical problem solving in the multifamily niche, as well as overcoming limiting beliefs. Thank you for joining us today, and now for our featured guest. Hey, welcome back to Ask Me How I Know. I'm so excited today to share some space with Adam Adams. And I seriously just want to say, Julie Holly, I love how you have Adam Adams.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
It's super fun. Adam, as y'all know, has a fantastic podcast, and it has fed my soul, my mind. It's just been such a fun podcast to listen to and to grow with. So thank you so much for that, because you're doing wonders for all of us out there. But I asked him onto the show, and I'm going to ask some different questions. So I'm excited to just spend some time picking your brain a little bit, because the thesis of your podcast is creative. It's I'm like, I'm never going to get it right if I don't look at everything. You know what? Do you ever get that way?
I am that way. I'm very much that way. I've got coaching clients that they jump on the Zoom and their name is like their company name. I
Right.
can't even call my coaching client by their actual name because I'm seeing that and I'm like, hey, LLC. I'm like, what is going on? I have to see it. So I'm right there with you.
I totally do that. Well, and then it's such I have this great way of always putting my foot in my mouth. And so I'm like, oh gosh, if I don't have my cheater sheets, I'm in big trouble. So anyway, but I will be leaving links and everything, because if you're not already listening to Adam Adams, and he's not on there alone. And I love that. I love that you guys share this. So Jason Lewis, right?
You got it.
I didn't look at that one.
You
Congratulations
crushed
to
it.
me. I know. I get nervous. It's so funny. But they have the Creative Real Estate podcast. I really got to wondering, Adam, of why? What is it for you that made you say where did you first initially have to get super creative?
Yeah, from the beginning and almost on every deal, the first $5 million of real estate that I bought with none of my own money, none of my own credit. Never used a bank, always used either lease option subject to wraparound mortgage, seller financing, private lenders, OPM, syndication. Every single thing that I had done in the beginning, I did with out of necessity. It was because I didn't have a whole bunch of money, but I had a whole bunch of ambition. So when I started the Creative Real Estate Lunch Club, which is a meetup in the Denver area, and when I founded the Creative Real Estate podcast, I did it by thinking to myself, there is so many people out there. Like there's just so many people that don't realize that they could get into this business if they stop telling themselves a story. And so I felt called, similar to how you felt called for your move not too long ago. I felt called that I must put that message out there to show people that you kind of need to open your mind, think outside the box, stop saying that your what you think is it holds you back is actually going to hold you back. So there's always a way to create a deal. So I created the Creative Real Estate podcast. Recently, I sold that podcast to Jason Lewis. And so it's always going to be a phenomenal podcast. His net worth is way higher than mine. He's just been crazy at what he does. He's been amazing. I can't tell you how many airplanes he's owned, how many, I couldn't tell you. Like this guy is one of the most humble people that you would ever meet, but he owns almost the same amount of real estate that I'm partnered in, but by himself. He's done syndication. He's done just about everything out there, and he's a really good guy. And I was wanting to start a podcast focused only on apartments where I could attract either passive investors or where I could attract um, coaching clients. And I felt like I would do that better if I launched a new podcast after 3 years of growing that one. So Jason is a really good friend. I only told the opportunity to three people, and I had three offers that were very high dollar amounts, and I took the lowest one, which is still a lot. But I took the lowest one because I am close with Jason. I want to help him grow, and he's focused more on creativity right now, and I'm focused more on apartments. But yeah, that's something that is feels good to be able to share, because for the last couple of months I haven't been able to share it, but because we're finally at the end of May, our contract says I can share it now. So
That is like, congratulations. Like, that is so exciting on so many different levels. When as you're talking, I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is one of the most attractive things for my family in the multifamily space is there's just so much humility. There are so many people that are successful. They have the abundance mentality, and then they just walk as just with humility, like the millionaire next door. And it's
yeah,
like, there's nothing more attractive than successful people that are, just grounded down to earth. So, what a compliment to Jason. I throw you into that category too, though. So,
I appreciate that a lot.
that, that humbles.
Humility means a lot to me. So if you call me that, then it means a lot. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, and that's so, since this is kind of new news and everything, like, I would love to know, like, what are those feelings that go along with, okay, I'm transferring this podcast over. I know it's in good
Oh,
hands.
yes.
Was it a little
No,
bit
for
like,
real. That creative real estate podcast, it feels like my baby. And I was thinking about, like, do I just, like, switch the name and that's all I do? Do I just do that? And I just kept, like, having this really terrible feeling inside. I was like, no, that's like changing the name of one of my children.
right?
And then I was like, well, do I just quit it? And I was like, that feels like, you know, even worse what I would do to a
Abandonment.
kid.
It's like not
Yeah.
even firehouse steps, even.
And so it was rough. And there was a couple of offers that I had above $60,000, and I was thinking, like, I could probably push this, but I had to go back to, like, if you are actually giving up a child, like, you want to make sure, like, or a dog, we could say a dog, that's easier. You want an absolute no, like, they're going to a good home. They're going to be treated right. They're going to be taken care of. They're in it for the long haul. They're not just going to give it to the next person. All of this stuff, like, you're thinking about it as you're thinking about getting out of the podcast. So it was, I wanted to sell it. I wanted it to move on, but I wanted to make sure that whomever took over it, that they would do a phenomenal job. And so that there comes Jason Lewis, and I knew that he had the drive, the passion, the humility, the experience to take it to the next step. I knew he would be a good home. And I'm really happy and excited for my journey with the apartment investing show.
Well, okay, so I'm going to go there because you seriously just like, my mind just exploded every time you talk. So when you go back to, it's almost like yes, almost like a dog, but since you're in Denver, a dog is really almost like a child. Let's be real. So,
Sure is. Sure is.
but he is doing a phenomenal job. I've still enjoyed the show, and I think that actually shows even so much care for your audience that you cultivated to be able, instead of just kind of abandoning the show or taking another course of action, but to sell it and put it in the hands and care of someone else. It's actually showing care for your audience too. So
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
And people who are listening now today, don't worry. You're probably going to hear me on there for the next 6 months. So it's not going to be a quick transition or anything like that. But yeah, I wasn't allowed to talk about it until the end of May. So
Yeah,
it's kind
that's
of
so
cool.
cool. But now you get to go, you get to do this all over again, and you don't have the growing pains of launching a new podcast. And, like there is a
Yeah.
growing curve or the growth curve. So tell me about your new podcast.
Right now it's a brand new YouTube channel only, and I'll probably in just a couple of weeks from the day we're recording this, it'll probably go on onto the podcast. There's a lot of steps toward when we launch podcasts. I That's one of the things that I coach and mentor other people to do is launch podcasts. Every single person that I've ever helped them launch has a more well listened to, well established, more downloads, more reviews than our podcast. We've really learned the process through trial and error. But the new podcast, I'm thrilled about it. I'm excited about it. It's only about apartment investing. It's called The Apartment Investing Show. You can find it at apartmentinvestingshow.com. So that's my plug. You can just go to
Yeah.
apartmentinvestingshow.com and you can either click that you want to do the YouTube or you can click that you want to do the iTunes. So it'll take you there. And I have been feeling for over 2 years of the three that I've been running the Creative Real Estate Podcast that I was called to do it, that I should do it, that I'm helping a lot of people. And at the same time, I was saying, this doesn't attract the exact right person, like the exact person that I ought to be working with. So if I am trying to work with passive investors who have a ton of capital, so because they can invest in our deals, it doesn't, as they're scrolling through podcasts, the Creative Real Estate Podcast isn't the first one that they're like, oh yeah, I need to know how to do money without deals. I'm definitely going to, they don't have to do
Right.
that. So
That's
it's
not
just,
their problem to
yeah,
overcome.
yeah. So I feel like we've done a lot of good for the world, and I feel good about that. And I should say, and I feel like I've been doing a lot of good for the world, and I feel like it's time to be able to have a mutually beneficial podcast where we're attracting people that are wanting to do big deals, that are wanting to operate the deals or wanting to be passive in the deals. They have the money to do it, and we can help them with coaching, or we can help them with opportunities that they can invest in passively. So uh, took me 2 years to actually decide to do it, and I needed to find the right person to take over the old one. But yeah, that's where we are.
Were there any other hurdles as you were trying to decide? I mean, 2 years is a long time to make that decision. So was that were there any limiting beliefs or something or challenges that you were overcoming to bring that about?
What challenges did I have? The first challenge that I had as I was making this come about is feeling like it's a totally different type of audience and not being ready to be willing to make the decision. Another thought that I had is I kept thinking I should just change the name. I should just change the name, but like
Right.
never, ever, ever resonated with me. Like I always thought this would be the best for me. This would be the best thing for I could do for me. And every time I even got closer to even considering doing it, I just couldn't. Like I don't know what it was. It was not part of me. It was part of something else that just said I couldn't. I don't know how to explain it any better than that. I don't want to be too foo foo, but there was some reason why I wasn't able to change the name, and I think it was outside of me. And just the thought of like cutting it out and stopping it completely and not being able to serve that audience that we had built over the 1 year or then the two and then the three was just a difficult. There was a lot of there's a lot of like nuances about the thought process around doing that that were hard for me to accept right away. So it
Can you
was a
speak?
slow move.
I know that I'm kind of picking, and so and I kind of do that because I am such a curious person, and so like, but what were some of those nuances that you're just like, are they things that
Um,
you can identify? Or are they just kind of those floaters that you're like, it just
yeah. So I I guess I felt really attached to the show and the listeners. I still do, but now I know that they're going to be taken care of. Like, go back to giving your dog up for adoption. You don't want to do it. You don't hope to do it. You're moving maybe to a new apartment. They don't allow dogs, and it's just like the worst thing that you could ever imagine. You're like, I have to do this move. I can only afford this place, and but like they will not let me have a dog, and I can't think of another way around it. You try for a couple of years to think of another way around it, but then all of a sudden you find an owner that like you resonate with, that like maybe you let your dogs sleep on your bed, and like all the owners that you know would never do that, and you're just like, no, that's cold. Like, how could you be that way?
right,
And all of a sudden you have this person that just loves to snuggle. They're like, oh, I would have this dog sleep in the bed all the time. I'm jealous of you. And you're like, wait, what? Really? Maybe this is going to work out and I can finally go, I can finally do that thing. So that's kind of the best way I can explain it.
You know what? The reason I kind of like, was pressing you on that a little bit, and I don't mean to press too much, but I think that so often people, anyone listening, it's like we get to that point and we know we need to make that next move. And I mean, like, especially you in coaching, in your coaching shoes and everything, and at your meetups. I mean, you can see like you are totally capable of pulling this off and doing this and being successful. But someone is like so nervous about making that step, and it feels monumental. Like, I think we're close enough in age to say Indiana Jones, number three, when he takes the leap of faith, he just
Yeah.
steps out into thin air. And if you're younger and you don't know that, you need to go watch the movie. It's hilarious and meaningful. But anyhow, it's like you want to take that leap, but it's so nerve wracking. But you need to, and if you don't, I think there's at some point like there's this atrophy that can happen, and it's like don't miss that moment. And you've given so much to the community in general. I mean, so many people have feasted off of all of your experience and expertise at your meetup groups, but to be able to transition, I'm so excited for I can't wait to like just delve into this world with you
Thank
and
you.
watch. It's going to be
I'm
awesome.
excited too.
So, well, and that was going to be one of my questions for you was, okay, everyone who has experience behind them, they reach this point where, for lack of a better purpose, like Grant Cardone, what's the next level? What are you going to do to 10x? What's your challenge for yourself? It sounds like this is part of it for you, perhaps.
So what's my challenge for the next step? What
Sure.
might be holding
Yeah.
me back? Okay.
Not holding you
Um,
back necessarily, but what is your next, like, I really wanted to do this. So for a new investor, they're like, I want to do my first deal. And you're like, you're
yeah.
awesome. I'm excited for you, but I want to do.
Yeah, the first deal's the hardest deal. The first syndication is the hardest syndication. We doubt ourselves. We are concerned. We don't want to fail. We don't want to mess up. And so once you accomplish your first deal, then you prove it to yourself and you feel like you prove it to other people, although you never really needed to prove it to somebody else. You only needed to gain the confidence for yourself. And so I absolutely remember that feeling when I was launching my meetup for the first time. I was brand new to Denver, and I heard that your network is your net worth, and I had no network here. So I thought, I'm screwed. And so I, thought to myself, how will I do this? And there's a lot holding me back. There was a lot of fear. I didn't feel like I did enough deals. I didn't feel like I had enough experience. I felt like there was other people that did more flips than me, other people that knew wholesaling better than me, other people that knew apartments better than me. And like, how do I call myself a leader among Denverites, and start and found this brand new meetup? And so I needed to somehow prove it to myself. I had to somehow overcome that fear, and I did. And the podcast was even worse because the meetup, I was like, oh, there's only going to be like 6 to 12 people there. The podcast, I was like, there's going to be hundreds to thousands of people listening to every single episode, and there are thousands now listening to every single episode. It's like I'm talking in front of a giant conference every single day. Every single day, there's no less than 600 people, even if I don't have a podcast airing that day that I'm speaking to. That could be overwhelming to know that that many people can hear you mess up, hear you.
Replay it over and over.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Oh, did you get that one? Huh?
yeah.
Can't believe he said that.
Exactly. So there's all this concern, there's all this fear, there's all this like mind games that hold you back from taking the first step. What's interesting is once you do it, it feels fine. So right now, as I'm starting a brand new podcast, what's really funny is I help people launch podcasts, and every single one of them has a top 1% podcast. They all have hundreds of reviews, thousands of listeners. And here I am, like, what if I mess up? Like, what if I launch this podcast and it doesn't go as well as some of my coaching clients? Like, that would be embarrassing. So I've got that. And then I've got
A little more pressure.
a little pressure for me. It feels like a little, right? And then there's my old podcast never was focused on multifamily. We had a lot of like everybody, right?
You did.
And so now I feel like good friends of mine, Rod Cleef, Michael Blanc, Joe Fairless. I feel like Jake and Gino. Uh, I feel like these people that have a specific multifamily podcast might be threatened or worry or wonder. And so it's all in my head. They obviously don't care. They obviously are friends and they want to see me do well. And they've seen me do well so far. But I have this random thought like maybe they're going to be hurt, jealous. What's the word? Threatened. And so I've got that going. And I also have the last thing that I'll say that kind of could be make me feel hesitated is that when you're barely starting out this podcasting thing and this new podcast around this one very niche topic, it makes me feel slightly blocked in. I'll tell you, because like with the creative real estate podcast, I could have anyone.
Right.
I could invite anyone. I could talk about any part of it. It was anything about creating a new deal or getting a result that not everyone can get. Every piece of that could be creative real estate. And now it's all got to be around apartment investing. And what if I want to start a podcast about podcasting? Because I coach people to do that. So it's just like, when you're deciding to get into a long-term relationship with someone or whatever, you're like, okay, this is serious. Am I really ready for all of this? And so I am feeling with the podcast that it is boxing me in, very monogamous and very serious relationship here with my apartment investing show. But I think that I dated for 3 years, and I think we're ready. I think we're ready to dive in and make this a thing. So yeah, there's a lot of different things going on in my mind.
Your analogies crack me up. My husband does not get half of my analogies, and he's like, "Okay, that's your analogy." Okay. But I'm tracking with you, and I absolutely love your analogies, and it's so accurate. I mean, you really are. But I think, do you know in your heart? When I think about, just when you go more niche, it oddly opens up a bigger pool. It's so
Yeah.
it's such a opposite effect that takes place, that you're like, I thought that I had to have this whole, the whole world. But there's this guy, he does a TED talk about like being in the box. And he said that we have to have a bit of the box around us because we need some level of structure, but you got to be able to sit on top of the box or stand on top of it and, poke out of it. And so you still have your box, you have your definite niche. You can still stand up. You're going to be okay.
Yeah. Like that.
That's so exciting. It's so I hope that it's helpful for everyone listening also to hear that. I mean, it doesn't matter what you're doing, you have to overcome. It's such like it's so between your ears every single time. Jake and Gino, they're the reason that I was able to launch their part. There are a few people that played a part in me launching my podcast, and it was like they said in one of theirs, like, yeah, remember our first podcast? And we just jumped in and we're like, well, we'll just make our mistakes and go forward. And I'm like, okay, I think I'll fail forward. And then one of my professional coaches was like, Julie, just set a date, get going. I'm like, okay, we're doing this. It's like,
Yeah.
I'm sure that you've noticed that there is a saturation, and this is interesting. This is not how I was expecting to take this, but this is one reason I actually like this podcast, because it just has an organic.
Yeah. I was
path.
about to say it's organic.
It is such an organic deal. Just like I said, it is. I did what I said, right? It's like a lobby conversation. There's so many people that are launching podcasts right now. Oh my goodness. In the last week and a half, just through, all the virtual network groups and everything, I am like, oh, like how many people are starting their podcasts? I can't even count them on my two hands. I'm excited that you have this program that people can go through, and I want to highlight that definitely in the show notes and everything. But do you have any pearls that you would dangle in front of people and say, hey, so all you people wanting to start your podcast?
Yes. I have a ton, and I think it could be really, really, really valuable if anyone is listening to the show and they're thinking about doing a podcast. And the first one is to acknowledge that they podcasts and podcast hosts are becoming a dime a dozen. Just acknowledge it. Just understand it. Be okay with it. Be okay with the fact that it's the new business card, and it's some business cards in the past get literally thrown away, and others you hold on to because you resonate with this person and you are going to actually work with them. So you got to acknowledge that and be okay with it. And at the same time, I want to show you how you can not become part of the 99%, because once you hit the algorithms that iTunes has, once you break into the algorithms, iTunes puts you in front of other people. When you're in the 99%, and it's sad that it's this huge number, you're swimming with a sea of people that only have a few reviews, that only have a few downloads per episode, and it can be scary. So if you care to push your brand out more than the typical podcast, there's a few things that you can do. And I've got literally 16 steps, like 16 outlined, precise, exact steps. And I can go over the ones that come to memory right away with you on the podcast now. The first step is that a lot of people miss is understanding who their avatar is. This is exactly what I messed up with. When I started a creative real estate podcast, all I wanted to do was help people. All I cared about was to inspire people. and which is good. And I'm glad that I did that podcast, and I'm glad
Yeah.
that everything. However, I wasn't thinking about how is it going to translate with what I was doing. I never made that a consideration, which is the big problem that most people also make a mistake. And so that what they do is they create a general real estate podcast, and then 99 other people create a general real estate podcast, and then your friend, the TED talker, who's talking about the box, and being able to you know, be very niche. Only 1% of people focus on this. Only 1% of people are like, I'm only going to talk about this one thing. I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to do it differently intentionally. So you got all these people just kind of doing it, and then you got one person out of 100 that's like focused. So understand your avatar, understand who you're helping, understand what they need, what they're going through. The questions that you ask your guest on your podcast should be the questions that your avatar would ask if they were the host of your podcast. We need to think like them, put our feet in their shoes. Most people miss that. I missed that the first time. And the next thing that you got to do is you got to name your podcast, and you want to name your podcast something that is going to resonate with your avatar. So now that you have an avatar, which is a ICA, or ideal client avatar, or the perfect person that you would work with. So if you want to raise capital, you help somebody who needs to place capital. If you have a coaching program, you want to start a podcast that helps your perfect coaching client, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And so you name it something. So when they're scrolling through, they must stop and watch you. They must stop because of the name. And even better, you figure out what they would search for if they weren't just scrolling. And so you want to keyword rich this stuff. The next thing that you'll do is you want to create a podcast logo. And everybody's like, oh, I'll just hire somebody. I'll just hire them and they'll just make a pretty podcast logo, and that's going to be great. But you're not considering really diving into the psychology of your avatar. That's why the avatar is the first primary part that you want to talk about. And so when you're creating this logo, you want to think about color psychology, the psychology of your avatar. What color will they see and like it? So you might say red is going to be bad. Red means stop. Red means red's too aggressive. And so I don't want to have red. Well, maybe, possibly, if you understood your avatar better, maybe red is the exact right color for them, or blue, or gold, or silver, because every color means something, and they don't always mean what we think they mean. Blue doesn't mean I'm trustworthy, come over here and trust me. Blue means you're attracting trustworthy people. And so if you want trustworthy people to follow your podcast, if your avatar themselves, if trustworthy is an important piece, is the only reason you would have blue. Not because you like blue, not because you want to be seen as trustworthy, etc. So color psychology, shape psychology, even fonts, different fonts mean different things and attract different people. And there's a lot of this stuff. So once you get all of these down and understand this, then you want to make sure that you are, let me skip a whole bunch of stuff and go to this part. Before the launch of your podcast, you must do ready, aim, fire. Everyone's talking about just launch, just do it, make the mistakes as you go.
And that's what I was, yep.
And that's when I'm not speaking directly to you, the host.
It's
okay. But what I am talking is, because everyone's saying you just need to take massive action, and because they just go ready, fire, aim, and they skip some of these really very important pieces where they're making sure they're talking to the right person, they're adding value to the exact person that they would be working with. that the person who listens to one episode will end up listening to 60 episodes and a bunch of other things that I'm about to share with you right now that are important. Here's the first one. People that often say ready, fire, aim for a podcast is they'll launch one podcast, they'll hurry and record one, and then they'll just launch it. And then when they get around to it, they'll record another one, and then they'll launch the second one. And then when they get around to it, they'll launch the third one. And the problem is they're always behind the 8 ball, and they're always stressed. And now their podcast has become a burden to them because they're like, man, this is hard to keep up with. So what I suggest my clients to do is to first simultaneously record 30 episodes and do a pre-launch of your podcast when you continue to pepper out and get people excited. So you got these 30 episodes getting recorded while you're telling people that you're going to have these episodes coming out. But the day that you actually launch, you get 6 people that will all 100% agree that they're going to share it with their audience. And you launch all 6 of these episodes on day 1. I call this the HBO or Showtime or Netflix method.
Okay.
HBO, Showtime, Netflix, they make billions of dollars. Would you agree? Billions of dollars. And they don't often just ready, fire, aim. They don't often just be like, oh, it'd be kind of cool to have a show about XYZ. Maybe let's get a couple of actors and let's just try something. And then when we have time, we'll try something else. No, they create the entire story. They record the entire story while they're telling people that it's going to be coming out. They start showing clips of it that about how exciting it's going to be when they come out. And then in general, they post several episodes all at once. Why? Because as soon as somebody, and I'm sorry I'm getting so passionate about this, as soon as somebody gets their phone and listens to one episode or watches one episode, and they're like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen.
More.
And then there's nothing else. There's nothing else available right now. So before they can actually completely get hooked and love the characters, because the main reason why you watch Netflix isn't because it's just a good movie. It's because you actually are connected with the characters. And so when you're launching your podcast, you do what they do. You post several episodes right in the beginning after you've already had a pre-launch. Now people are excited that it's coming. And now when they listen to 6 and they're like, this is awesome. I'm going to keep going and going and going. If you don't do that, they'll listen to 1. They'll say, that was pretty dang awesome. And they'll look for the next episode. It won't be there. And you might forget for 2 weeks because you're busy. You did Ready, Fire, Aim. And now all of a sudden they go to a different podcast and they get hooked into that other podcast and you've lost them. You've lost them for a long time and they may never, ever, ever remember to come back to that show because they're already with some other guy or with some other girl.
This is a bad relationship. No, going back.
So that's really critical to my coaching clients. If I'm going to help you have a top 1% podcast, we do the Netflix, the Showtime, the HBO launch, where we do a pre-launch, a pre-launch. We get people excited about it. We start peppering it out. And then when it actually launches, we have to hack into the algorithm. So I teach my clients how to get the most amount of reviews in the shortest amount of time. Because once we hack into the algorithm, now it's not you and your 20 friends listening. It's now iTunes pushing you in front of the new and noteworthy. This guy in my mastermind, I helped him launch a podcast April of last year. His name's Steven Pesavento. Most people don't know that once upon a time, nobody knew who he was. So in March of last year, nobody knew him. In April of last year, we launched the podcast exactly like this. And what we did is he launched his investor mindset podcast the same week as Bigger Pockets Business. My other friend, Jay Scott, launched their podcast. Bigger Pockets, ever heard of them? Of course, they have a giant list, a lot of people on their email list, a lot of people paying subscribers to biggerpockets.com. And Jay Scott, great guy, huge reputation, big email list himself. And all of the Bigger Pockets was launching same day as my coaching client, the guy in my mastermind, not a one-on-one client, but a mastermind client, launched his investor mindset podcast. And I taught him how to control the reviews. And Bigger Pockets, they just thought that they could just put it out to their million listeners.
We're big. We have this huge database.
Yeah.
We're good.
So they were competing. They were launching at the same time. Bigger Pockets was number 4 in one category. Bigger Pockets Business was number 4 in the business category. And that was it. You couldn't find them anywhere else. My client, Stephen Pesavento, Investor Mindset Podcast, number 1 in the business category, and also top 10 in new and noteworthy, also top 10 in real estate, also top 10 in mindset. 4 categories at the exact same time, because we actually control the reviews. So it's all of that, and then there's follow-up, there's marketing, there's creating the image cards that your the people that come on your show will share. And so I get into a lot more detail with that with clients, but yeah, that I hope that's all really helpful.
Oh golly, you just gave everybody a silver platter, like, okay, here you go. And that's, you skimmed the surface. I know, I can see as I'm watching, I'm like, I know that's so surface level for all of this, but
I'm not meaning it to be. I wanted to get, granular and beneficial to someone who is listening. So I
no,
hope
it doesn't come off like you're trying to withhold anything at all.
Okay.
It doesn't come off. Yeah, you greedy mongrel, get off my show. No.
Our podcast launches to get in the top 1%. It takes me 3 months to work with somebody. I worked with Stephen from February, March, and April, but it takes 3 months. So we couldn't do it all in a 1-hour call anyway.
Oh,
yeah.
no way. But even just, everything that you're talking about, I have family that's in marketing, and it's like I get bits and pieces of what they do, and it's like, oh yeah, what you're talking about with the color and with like, it's so different. But in having that avatar, I hear that. Actually, oddly, Michael Blanc just had what's her, see, it's not in front of me, I don't have it on a little sticky note in front of me. But he just had a guest on, and she was talking about avatar and just marketing in general.
Was it one of the Good Egg people?
No, it wasn't.
Okay.
It wasn't. But and I feel bad that I don't, because she definitely deserves like a shout out on that. Let's just see real fast. Amy Porterfield.
Oh, okay. Amy Porterfield is amazing. She anyway. Amy Porterfield is incredibly famous, and she does really, really, really well. And a lot of the gurus go to her. So
yeah, well, she was talking. She really drilled down deep into that avatar. Like you got into. She hammered home on that. But and then I can hear the passion. It's like, come on, you gotta know. Like, don't try to sell.
My
Pepsi.
avatar has one age, not an age range. It's literally 42 years old at one race, and everybody's like, "Oh, don't be racist." No, my avatar is Indian, not because I wouldn't work with anyone else, but because working with an Indian 42-year-old male with 2 kids who's already invested passively in a certain amount of deals and has a certain amount of money still left, plus is an engineer. My avatar is an engineer.
You had the occupation.
Yeah. And obviously, yeah. And so we work with other people a lot. We have 70, 80-year-old investors. We have 25, 21-year-old passive investors. We're not being discriminatory, but when we create an episode, we have a picture of our 42-year-old male Indian engineer with 2 kids, and we know his story, and we just make sure that he would keep listening to our podcast over and over and over. If my avatar, who has a name, I won't say it, if my avatar wouldn't listen to the next episode, or wouldn't like this episode, or wouldn't get value out of this episode, then we don't do it. We just literally do not do it. Um, but there's still a lot of people that are every other, race, gender, sex, what I guess gender. I guess I said the same thing twice. But age, we're not ageist. We know the exact right person for us to make sure that we're attracting. If you speak to everyone, you speak to no one. So we've really got that niche down.
It's almost like an echo. Like if you're trying to speak to everyone, and you're not at the gorge in, Washington, it's just going to go out and, you know,
Ah,
go
good point.
everywhere. But if you're at the gorge and you speak to your avatar, it's going to resonate with them and sound beautiful.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm trying to keep up with your analogies. No
You
kidding.
you crushed it. You crushed it.
Oh my goodness. Oh man, this is so, so I mean I really break a lot of the molds. I should probably go through your podcast program. But I'm like, this really went such a different direction than I was, I kind of like it. I feel like I'm always like on this really fun ride. Like, this is great. It's a conversation. It's real. But just all the information about podcasts and podcasting, and I know firsthand the value that adds to people out there right now when I just see what's taking place. I mean, some big names getting ready to open up their podcasts and everything, and I'm like, oh wow,
Yeah.
like you know, we don't have to hide anything here. I'm not going to gloss it over. We know I don't know anything about podcasting. I just get the material out there. I'm like, when I hear you talk, I'm like, oh my goodness, wow. But I've been dropping little things that I've learned the hard way.
Yeah.
Hey, make sure you do this. I didn't know this.
If it's any consolation, I did it this way too for the first time. I didn't learn it until later, and I've been helping people do it for a while and seeing their massive success and seeing me be left behind. And so I too did that, and our podcast is fairly good. We
It
the
is
old one,
fantastic.
we had like 490 reviews last week, and 484 of them were 5-star reviews. So only 6, and 2 of them were 4, 2 of them were 1, which I think you should probably get more than that on the 1-star reviews. But yeah, I'm really happy about it. I'm really grateful to be a part of it. Um, and we did well. We're the Creative Real Estate Podcast is absolutely in the top 1% of podcasts now. First year was rough, and we learned there was a lot of bumps in the road, and we didn't exactly have the best tires. So
I will say the one thing I know that I have done right is, and I like when you said, make sure you have all your episode, like you have episodes recorded. It's like having a good savings account,
yep.
You just don't want to be on fire and like freaked out, like, oh gosh, it's like Sunday and I gotta get this out there for tomorrow. I mean, like, that's a
Yeah.
terrible feeling. But I did that and I made a commitment. I'm like, I'm committed to this for, I'm like minimum of a year, minimum. Like, you don't just it's like writing a book, I that was one of my things. So I definitely have like the podcast recorded so that I'm not feeling that burn.
It
And
helps, right?
oh my gosh, well,
Most
I
people don't
have
do
fun.
that.
I love
Most
it.
people, when they're launching podcasts, after just a few weeks, it becomes a chore. It becomes stressful. A lot of people are editing it themselves, which is good to save money, but it also isn't your most best use of time. And like life comes at you, your kids come at you, your work comes at you, your sweetheart comes at you, and it like actually um starts to feel like a chore if you don't do that.
Or
So
like work.
like yeah, like work. Yeah. So so it's good. It's good that you did that, and I hope that the listener takes that and says, "I get it. I don't want to be behind the 8 ball. I don't want to be stressed about this." I invite people to the podcast, at least the old podcast. with about creative real estate. I invite a lot of people to that show, and I have my all of my Wednesdays. Sorry if I'm going on to a tangent. All of my Wednesdays are completely blocked, so it's only podcasts. My assistants won't let me have a podcast where people come on my show unless it's a Wednesday. If somebody is a big name and they can't do it Wednesday, that's cool. I just won't have that big name because like that's only time that I do it. It's blocked completely out and allows me to do work on the other days. But we record anywhere from 4 to 6, 3 to 4 Wednesdays a month, and we only really launch 3 a week. And so, like you talked about having a savings account, I call it literally, that's the language that my team calls this. I say I need a minimum of 12 in the bank, which is a whole month of episodes.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Stay ahead of it. So it's fun. So you must be enjoying it if you're going to launch another one.
Let me give you more than just enjoying it. Let me give your listeners some things to think about that will hopefully benefit them. Yeah, I enjoy it, but just enjoying it I don't think is enough for most people, and it
Right.
certainly wouldn't be enough for me. Unfortunately, I hate to admit it. So, what do I get out of the podcast? Yes, I get passive investors. Sometimes we do syndication, larger apartment buildings that we'll close and purchase, but with other people's money. So sometimes we'll have
And
30 plus people that passively invest, and most of them find us through the podcast. Even though we didn't specifically look for the avatar, people share it with other people. When you have a thought leadership platform, people talk behind your back, whether you like it or not. And if you're doing a good job, they'll talk good behind your back and they'll share it with other people. And that happens. And we get tons of passive investors that opt into the list every single week. There's not a week that goes by that we don't have at least one and up to 10 people asking, can I please put $1 million into your deal? Right? Every single week we
I
do
hate having that problem. Adam, that's just too much
that.
of a problem for me.
Okay. So you attract your avatar. You also get your name out there as a business card. And so when you're shaking hands with your avatar, your 42-year-old male Indian engineer, when you're shaking hands with them and asking if they like to have a beer, and just you could ask them more about what they do in engineering, you think it's fascinating. While you're having that drink, you're asking questions, and then he asks you, what do you do? And you say, I just do this. I've got a podcast about it too. And he's like, really? You got a podcast on that? And then you grab his phone, you sign in, you subscribe to the show and say, feel free to listen to any episodes that you want. You might want to start with episode 242 about market research, where Neil Bawa came on and really dove deep. And then that avatar listens to 60 of your episodes and calls you and says, holy cow, Adam, I just listened to 60 episodes. I binge watched these. And now I don't want to invest passively with these other people. I want to passively invest with you. Okay. But here's the last one that I want to share with your
Yeah.
listener.
But wait, there's more.
Because this one's my favorite one by far. And everyone seems to miss it. And I don't want the listener to miss it. And I certainly don't want you to miss it either. Unless you've already noticed that this is the biggest thing for you. You gain more credibility with listeners and influencers, and they invite you on their show because reciprocity is an actual law. And it tends to be that when they invite you to your show, it's highly probable that you'll invite them to your show, and you connect with them, you get to know them, and you start doing deals with them. And when you have something you need, you reach out to top level people. When we talk about your network is your net worth, the best way to be closely connected with top influencers in the state, how Michael Blanc had Amy Porterfield on his show, is because he's an influencer himself, and she's probably going to return the favor. It's a bigger deal than the listener generally feels. But you become the average of the five people you hang out around with the most. And when you're interviewing high level people and growing connections with high level people, your whole mindset shifts. You become a better person and you have the connection that you need the next time that you have a deal or you need to raise money. It's been the single most valuable thing in my business is to be able to. I text message Joe Fairless today, May 25th, on
Memorial
his cell
Day,
phone
right?
because it's his birthday and he's my friend. It's it, a lot of listeners like don't understand that. Like they don't understand the power that I can just text message Joe a happy birthday because I know his birthday. I'm his friend. I've helped him a lot with his meetup group. I've helped him a lot filling the seats at his best ever conference. And anytime I need something, he remembers that I remember his birthday, and he remembers that I helped him get a lot of people into his seats, and he remembers that you know what I mean? Like that type of a relationship with high level people. He owns over $1 billion of real estate today. Is priceless.
Absolutely priceless. I can agree with you more. And I will circle back to the fact that when you launched your first podcast, you were in Denver, and I mean, you're like, I'm new. What do I do? I get a meetup group, and for me, I had a similar thing, and that's why I have a podcast. Is that I moved from being in a city in a suburb to this rural community where the closest meetup group I could start is 2.5 hours away, and that will probably end up happening. But it's like, what can I do right now in a town of 2,500 people? Because these people aren't the people, not all of them. There are some that will invest, but I mean, this is not my avatar. And how can I get out and reach those people, even when I'm
Mm,
living in this isolated location? So it's amazing.
yeah.
Like if you're willing to think outside the box, step up on the box a little bit, you can leverage things. But well, you have my wheelhouse is turning. I'm like, okay, well, I got to do a lot of things a lot better. So amazing.
There's a lot to it. So I hope we could inspire a couple of people that they might say I should probably start one because there's just too many benefits. There's just way too many benefits
There,
for sure.
there are, and I will say, I mean, being a fledgling podcaster at this and everything, just trying to connect with some new brokers in a new market. I didn't know that was one of my like, whoa moments where I'm like, here I am. I'm a nobody to these brokers. And we know it's rough breaking into brokers when you're not a name that's recognized. And I just sent a message to this broker who had mentioned that he was driving around, and I just dropped the podcast link. And I said, oh, hey, here's a podcast. And I linked to somebody that's in that same geographical area that they may have already had a connection with. And sure enough, next thing you know, I have an email from the managing broker. I didn't give it to the managing broker. Like other people from that office are emailing me saying, "Oh, hey, love your podcast. I happen to know this person that you interviewed," and it's just
Yeah.
that was one of those aha moments I shared with my small group. I'm just like, "Whoa, I didn't, I didn't even see that coming." You know.
When you have a thought leadership platform, when you have a podcast, people talk behind your back, whether you like it or not. And if you're doing a good job, they'll say good things and they'll connect with you.
No.
So you're seeing that. It's awesome.
It is awesome. I love what you're doing. I love your mission. I mean, everything that you've already contributed, and then I feel like you're contributing like this whole other level as you're ready to, as you're coaching podcasters and everything. Because it's just a little
It's
bit
fun.
blown away.
It's fun. I've been able to help some really good famous people grow some of their start podcasts and grow their meetups or grow their groups it's my favorite part is the marketing, which is why sometimes I wonder if I should be starting a podcast about like branding versus a podcast about apartments, but ultimately I know that the apartments are the long lasting money for me. And so that's what I want to do, um, forever, no matter what. And maybe coaching people to brand themselves and launch podcasts. Maybe that's a 5-year thing, because that's me working. That's me, like, I want to work one on one with my person, and apartments are a team for me working. So um, it's interesting, the dilemmas that we can have as we start out and as we grow.
It is. Well, Adam, thank you. I just want to say thank you once again for joining me for this episode of Ask Me How I Know. You know a lot. We already knew that, but thank you for sharing your expertise and letting me, just kind of lean into a little bit and say, but really, what about that?
Oh, of course, it was my pleasure. It was fun to kind of let it organically move through like a
And
conversation, just like you said, on in the outside of you're at a conference and it's just whatever you would talk about. It's awesome.
all right. Well, everybody, make sure I will drop all the links and everything, but make sure you check out Adam's work, what he's doing. I always circle back, and Adam, I don't know if you know this, but I always say, go and check out what offerings, Adam and his company have, because it might be the right fit for you. I don't know if you're a 42-year-old Indian engineer with 2 children, but, but, it might be the right offering for you. And, those connections are really important. Before you invest passively. And so it's really important to check everybody out and see if it's the right fit for you. Go make it a great day.
Thanks so much for joining me for another episode of Ask Me How I Know. My guests are the most humble successes, so be sure to show them your appreciation by rating this episode 5 stars, which sounds silly, but let's be real. Ratings, likes, and shares, they take no time at all, but make all the difference in the world, if only to boost morale. Also, since I don't spend time on the how and why they got into investing, be sure to check out the show notes to get to know more about today's guests, including other podcasts they've been on that has a more traditional format that will give other details about their investment journey. It'll also tell you things like the most influential person in their life and what they're reading right now, as well as how to connect with them. And please, subscribe and rate Ask Me How I Know so it reaches other listeners like you. Until next time, go find your freedom.